Tourniquets have one single purpose, and that is to save lives. Choosing the right tourniquet can mean saving lives. Choosing the wrong tourniquet can mean costing lives. So today we're going to talk about 4 commonly available tourniquets that we recommend and 1 commonly available one that we do not recommend. First, let me set a little background here. The Department of Defense has what they call the Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care, commonly referred to as the TCCC. The TCCC looks at testing done with tourniquets, they look at real-world uses of tourniquets, and then they recommend whether a tourniquet be used by the military or not. Now, pause there. A lot of times you'll hear TCCC approved. They don't actually approve them, they recommend them. So there is a little bit of a nuance difference in there. And sometimes I catch myself saying it too, so don't worry if you do. Anyway, the TCCC has currently 8 windlass tourniquets that are available on the market that you can buy. We're going to talk about 4 of them today. I've trained with most of them. These are the 4 that I would recommend for most people. The first one is the CAT tourniquet, the Combat Application Tourniquet. This is the most common one that you will find. If you look at the next police officer you see, if you were in the military, you probably saw CAT tourniquets. If you go to a bleeding control station in the airport or in an office building, something like that, and open it up, you will most likely find a CAT tourniquet. Because this is the most common and a super easy to use tourniquet, this is what we typically train people with. If you can use the CAT, you can use all of the other ones, no problem. So a couple features of the CAT. This is a polymer nylon. The windlass is the part that you're going to turn to tighten it up, add more pressure to it. So these are pretty stable. There were anecdotes of first and second generation ones that were breaking under extreme heat and things like that. This is a Gen 7 tourniquet, so that's not a concern anymore. This is easy to apply. Even if you wanted to apply it to yourself with one hand, you simply put it on, grab the tab, pull, and then start turning it until it is tight and blood flow stops. You lock it into the cleat here, take this tab, pull it over, write the time on it. Easy, right? Take this off. In most classes, I can take a person that has never ever touched a tourniquet in their lives, and by the end of the class, they could do that in 30 to 45 seconds. So these are really, really easy to use. The locking cleat, you can go in from either side when you're turning, so it really doesn't matter which direction you turn. The way that this works is there is a Kevlar ribbon that runs the inside of this bigger band. And when you turn the windlass, it pulls that ribbon and creates more tension so that you can cut off the flow of blood. These are really easy to use. They're very common. I would recommend that this is the one that you initially learn on. Now, the next one to talk about is the SOFTT. So the SOFTT is another windlass tourniquet. It's a little bit different in that it doesn't have the Velcro. So if you are self-applying, for example, you might have to take a couple of pulls to get it down tight, then start turning your windlass. Now, it's also a little more difficult to get off than the one, here we go. Unlike the CAT that has the Kevlar ribbon running around the inside, in this case, you are turning the strap itself. So to just tighten it down. The SOFTT has a couple of differences. In terms of function and application, same. It does have a couple of differences. One is this metal hook. So if you have an entrapped limb, so you can't loop it over it, you have to go under and circle it, you can easily do that. With the cat, you have to, you go ahead, go under, uncircle, then you have to thread it through here and snap it, pull it and do your application. It's not difficult to do, it's just one more thing to do, and you have to thread it through there. Sometimes if it's low light, that kind of thing, it's a little harder to do. The other thing on this is the SOFTT can fold down a lot smaller. This is the SOFTT that I carry with me all the time. Typically, when you see a cat, it's folded up like this. Here's the SOFTT, little smaller. Now, I usually carry this in my bag that I have with me. In that case, it really doesn't make a big difference. But a lot of times, especially if I'm working on church safety or that kind of thing, I'm using an ankle medical kit so that I can carry all that stuff in there. Well, in this case, having the smaller one on my ankle is a lot more convenient. So that kind of matters. The last thing to really bring up about the SOFTT is that it is longer than the cat, which means it can go around a bigger limb. Now, you may or may not have noticed it, but Americans are getting a little thicker. And so this could be a concern for some people. I've actually had a class where a student he was too big even for these. There was no way we were going to put a tourniquet on him, but something to think about. Now, you'll notice a difference between these two. This one is this is a first generation. When you are done tightening, then you just drop this over it and it holds it into place. The new ones have the cleat, same as the cat, and this over top of it. So you have two things holding tension, making sure that it does not loosen at all. The next one to talk about is the SAM XT. This was probably one of the less commonly found ones, but it is kind of a cheat code too. It works very, very similar to the cat tourniquet, with one difference. With the cat, you pull it tight and then try to get the tension to stay with the Velcro. In the case of the SAM XT, you simply pull it until you hear the click. Once you hear the click, it's in place. You can start turning the windlass and tightening it down. Once you tighten it down, you put it in the cleat just like you do on the other ones, and put your little tab across, write the time of application on it. So this is almost a cheat code. It is super fast, super easy to put on. Generally speaking, I do not train students on this. I don't even let them see it until they have learned to use this consistently. Once they can use this, I introduce this to them as a convenience. Now, there are exceptions to that. Sometimes when we are setting up kits for people, if they are going to use the SAM XTs in those kits, then we train them on that, of course. Fourth one to talk about is the TMT, the Tactical Mechanical Tourniquet. So it works basically the same as the cat and the other ones. It's got the Velcro, you put it on. It's got a lot of Velcro, and the Velcro is really substantial. So like the SOFTT, you may have to cam it through a little bit because of the buckle. Once you get it in place, then you start cranking down on the windlass. So getting this off, there we go. Kind of leads us to one of the other features. Just like the SOFTT, it has a buckle that you can clip and unclip it with. Now, two things about the TMT. One is it's got a lot of Velcro, and sometimes that can actually get in your way. It's catching on clothing. Sometimes I've had that happen where students were trying to use it. It was catching on their clothing. Sometimes it just catches on itself. But nothing that you can't overcome. It just becomes a kind of a bother. The other thing on it is that it's wider than the other ones. So here's the comparison, a little wider than the SAM XT. a little wider than the SOFTT, and even a little wider than the CAT. So that's nice that, you know, it spreads the pressure out a little bit more, less potential for any tissue damage, anything like that. It does have a nice sturdy windlass. There are two things that give me a little pause on this one. One is the stiffener on the back. Now all of these, well, two of the three also have a stiffener, but the stiffener is a little more flexible. This one is not. It's pretty sturdy. And here's why that's a concern for me. If you have a really young child, toddler, whatever, this is all the further down that this will go. That may not be tight enough for a really young child. So that's just a consideration to think of. The other thing on this is you have to pay a little bit of attention to the cleat that it locks into. Now, the other ones, doesn't matter which direction you turn, it's got the same cleat either direction. This cleat is one way only. So once it goes in, then it's locked in and it's very secure. In fact, it's a little bit of a pain to get out. But it can only go in from that side. So if you are twisting and you get to a point where you just can't quite get all the way over to that side, you may find yourself having to just go ahead and turn the other direction. And we don't want to ever release tension. Once we get blood flow stopped, we want it stopped and we want to keep it stopped. So is that a big problem? Probably not. It's just something to think about. It's not quite as friendly in terms of that application. All right. Now let's talk for a second about counterfeit tourniquets. Often people want to get a tourniquet, they go on Amazon because that's where everything is, right? It's on Amazon and it'll be at your house in 2 days. And they type in tourniquet and they get a whole list of results and they're cheap and you're like, wow, this is great and I'll buy 2. And they're trash. They are counterfeit trash. Let me show you why. First of all, if you are buying a tourniquet and you are paying less than $25, you are buying a counterfeit. If you are paying more than $35, you're getting ripped off. It stays in that sweet spot. Let me show you a couple of differences. So here is your CAT tourniquet. Here is your Amazon fake tourniquet. Where we saw this is a nice, big, sturdy windlass. This is a cheap, junky, not sturdy windlass. Second thing is this ribbon is made out of Kevlar. This is fabric. It is not Kevlar. So when you're turning something down and you are twisting it to the point where it is compressing all of that tissue, compressing the artery and trying to cut off blood flow, there's going to be a lot of tension on it. I want it to be on something that's made out of Kevlar, not something that's made out of polyester or some nonsense like that. The Velcro itself it's home grade trash. It's not sturdy commercial grade Velcro that you find on the CAT. Also, just little workmanship things, like for example, the cleat here. The Velcro doesn't go all the way over. They didn't put it on carefully. Also, this Velcro is already starting to come up just from pulling the tab a few times in training. This is not what I want. On this side, the Velcro goes over because again, it wasn't put on correctly. Like I said at the very beginning, tourniquets have one purpose in life. That is to save lives. This is not where you want to save $5. Don't cheap out on one of these. The description below will have links to all 4 of the tourniquets that we have talked about. All 4 of these are TCCC recommended. The links will take you to a reputable company that will make sure that you get the genuine article. One last thing to look at if you want to look at them, cat tourniquets have the cat information on it, and they also have in the back of that stiffener all of that information about it being a cat tourniquet. That's the genuine one. That's what you want to go with, or one of these other ones, like the SOFTT, for example, has all of their information on the back of it. SAM-XT has information as well, where it's embossed in there that it's a SAM tourniquet. I have seen tons of counterfeits of this. I've never seen a counterfeit TMT. I don't recall seeing a counterfeit SOFTT or SAM-XT, but you will find a ton of these. They're made with genuine Chinesium, and it's trash. So don't buy it, don't skimp, don't cheap out. Now, I did tell you that there was going to be one that we do not recommend. That is the RATS Tourniquet. RATS has an interesting idea, but it's not quite what they claim it to be. So this was invented by a Special Forces medic. So immediately everybody's like, well, this must be great. He knows what he's talking about. And he's a great guy. He does know what he's talking about. This is not the answer that it's presented to be. One of the big reasons that people like the RATS Tourniquet is because you can flatten it out and put it inside of a belt and be carrying a tourniquet with no additional bulk on your belt. Well, that seems convenient, but you have to pull that out. You thread it through this cleat, loop it down to get about a 3-finger loop in there. Then you put it on, wrap, and then cleat it off. And at that point, does it occlude blood? Probably. It's, and you'll see tests where, the guy will put it on his leg and he'll crank it down and he put a pulse oximeter on and shows you that there's no blood flow going on. The problem with this is, one, as you can see, self-application is not nearly as easy as it is with something like the cat. Now, RATS tells you that this is the fastest tourniquet on the market, and I would dispute that. You just saw an application with a self-application with the RATS. Now compare that to I could put one more turn in there if I want, put it on. Tell me which one was faster. You saw it. This is not the first time I've tried to use the RATS Tourniquet, so it's not like, oh, well, he's not experienced with it. I've used it a bunch of times. We use it in demonstrations all the time. The other thing that I kind of have that I don't like about the RATS Tourniquet is that they engaged in some questionable marketing. So as I talked about in the beginning, TCCC doesn't approve, they recommend tourniquets. They do not recommend this. So what RATS did was they went out and formed a company called TCCC, and then they were marketing this as a TCCC approved tourniquet. Well, to someone who is not in that world, they look at it and they go, oh, well, the military says it's okay, it must be good to go, and they bought a bunch of these. And then they found out that TCCC was really a company that RATS had formed themselves. The real TCCC took them to court, said this is a trademark infringement. The court agreed, and RATS had to stop calling themselves TCCC approved. I think that if you have to fib about your product, you probably don't have a great product. but that's just my opinion. And I'm the guy doing the videos, so my opinion is the one you're going to hear. Which one do you buy? The answer is it doesn't matter which one of these 4 tourniquets you buy. Get it, get instruction on how to use it properly, and then train with it. Train with it until you can do it automatically and not have to think through it in the time when you actually need it. Trying to remember everything under stress is a little bit harder than just being able to do it because you've done it and it's automatic. That's the goal. That's what you want. Now, on a kind of a side note on training and practice, buy 2. Never train with the tourniquet that you are actually going to use. Using these over and over and over, even the really good ones, like a cat, the Velcro wears out. We've all had Velcro. We know Velcro wears out when you keep pulling it on and off. So I don't want to trust one that I've used 150, 200 times in a class to actually hold when I need it to save my life or to save my child's life or to save my wife. The other thing is this ribbon, even though it's Kevlar and it's super strong, it gets stretched. You're putting it under a boatload of pressure. It eventually stretches out. It may not constrict as well. So buy an inexpensive one to practice with. If your budget is super tight, by the way, that's why you see the blue ones on these. These are training ones so that we don't get them mixed in with our real ones. But if you're on a super tight budget, go ahead and buy a cheap knockoff to train with. If it fails while you're training, who cares? 1, nobody dies, so that's a good thing. 2, it just proves why this one was worth more money in the first place. So get a tourniquet, learn how to use it, practice with it, and keep your church, your family, and your community safe this week. We'll talk to you later.